Hello and welcome everyone to this third Going Around Things video, where we'll be talking about going around pedestrians walking along the side of the roadway. Now you'd think all pedestrians are created equally. Well, I guess that part is true, but when it comes to driving, you can't be further from the truth. Now, let me explain why. So here we have the first type of pedestrian. Let's call her the easy glider. Just walking along, doing her thing, and it's fairly predictable that she's going to stay off towards the outer edge of the street and out of my path of travel. Now, even though I do feel that this pedestrian is going to stay put in her area of the roadway, being a safe-minded driver, I know this situation still carries a bit of risk. So to get that risk down to bare minimum, I'm going to do this. Now, let me ask you for forgiveness in advance for the crude language I'm about to use, but my students tended to remember my teaching way more often by using the following description. So, all I'm going to do is move my vehicle over and away from the pedestrian enough that if she were to fall over sideways right at this very moment, there is no way I could run over her head. Now, I did mention I'm sorry about the language, but guaranteed you will remember this every time you're driving up towards anyone walking along the side of the street, because that's the kind of room you want to give pedestrians. Okay, now here's the next type of pedestrian, which we'll call the unpredictables. So in this example here, we have some older teenagers or possibly young adults goofing around, having fun, wrestling with each other as they're walking down the street. Now, as soon as I see this, I'm thinking, man, these guys could trip and fall into the street at any moment now. And as soon as that thought goes through my mind, my foot is immediately off the gas pedal, and I'm either going to cover my brake and horn, or depending on my speed, I may just go to straight braking, because I may need to stop quickly. But either way, I'm definitely keeping my hand covering that horn. Now, the next thing on the list, whenever possible, is I always try to give the area around these type of pedestrians as wide a berth as possible. So here, because I can see well ahead and everything is clear, I'll move over as far to my left as I can. But in this case, where I'm so close to the intersection, if I was able to get eye contact and any sign these guys were settling down, well then I would stick with giving them the same amount of space that I gave this solo pedestrian earlier. But depending on the time of day or situation, the last thing that crosses my mind is, I don't know if these people are impaired in any way, because people can be very unpredictable when they're impaired, especially when they've been drinking. So once that thought crosses my mind, I want to remove the horn part of the cover my brake and horn, because you never know what could set somebody off if they've had too much to drink, and you do not want to be dealing with an angry drunk. So I will just use speed control and vehicle positioning to keep the situation safe. Now let's take a quick side note since we're on the subject. When I'm driving on weekend evenings, I am very careful about using my horn, even in situations that are usually harmless, like using a quick little beep of the horn to gently nudge the vehicle ahead to tell them that the light has turned green since they're not moving. So even though I would have done this during the day, in the evening, I choose to stay silent because you never know who's in the other vehicle and how they will respond. So during the evening, especially Friday through Sunday, I am very mindful of this. Now, before we get back to it, I just ask if you're enjoying this video, can you reach up right now and quickly give it a like? Thank you very much. Alrighty, with that said, let's move on. Okay, now let's talk about young pedestrians, like the 7 to 10 age. So what I want you to be most aware of is, at this age, kids are always making up games in their mind and using their imagination as they're walking along, and you never know when something in their wonderful little brain will spur them into bolting into the street because they saw a cool rock or a neat leaf or whatever caught their eye. So when you see a kid around this age, either by themselves or with friends, watch your speed, give them a really big berth, and expect the unexpected. Because after all, they're just kids, and their innocent little brains, they don't think about danger. Now, if you happen to see a young kid walking a dog, or shall I say the dog walking the kid, pay extra attention and pull out every safety precaution you're learning in this side street driving series. Okay, now let's move on and talk about pedestrians wanting to cross the street. So the first thing we should talk about is what makes a legal crosswalk. Now, the answer is more simple than you might think. There is a legal crosswalk anywhere where two roads meet, with or without painted lines. Now, this is important to remember because you're not likely to find a painted crosswalk area when you're driving in side street areas. So whether you're walking on a path or an ever so rare side street sidewalk, just think of the crosswalk area as an extension of what you're walking on. But always remember, with or without lines, all crosswalks are equal in the eyes of the law. Now, this is also important to remember when you come across a T intersection, because the extension of the walking path or sidewalk applies here as well, just as it does at all typical intersections. Okay, let's focus on the actual pedestrian now. So let's go through a few different types of pedestrians, starting with these two. Now, with pedestrian A, you can see that he's right at the edge of the road. His body language is showing that he is primed and ready to go at any moment. And in real life, you'd probably see his head turning left and right quite often as he tries to figure out when it would be safe to cross. And now let's check out pedestrian B, because there's quite a difference. This guy is standing far back from the corner, about 1 meter or 2 to 3 feet back, and as you can see by his posture, he's not really interested in moving. I mean, his legs are crossed, for goodness sakes. So my guess would be that he's probably waiting for a friend who's coming to pick him up. And then you have pedestrian C, who, as you can see, hasn't even reached the corner yet. Now, I've used these 3 examples because they're situations that one would come across fairly often. So with pedestrian A, here you have someone who definitely wants to cross the street. So this is a pedestrian I would definitely stop for. Then with pedestrian B, here you have a case where the person looks totally disinterested and is showing no sign of being prepared to cross. So I wouldn't even think of stopping. And finally, there's pedestrian C, which is the type of pedestrian that drivers make the most mistakes on. And that's because this pedestrian is the hardest to figure out, since there are a lot of different ways this could go. Because at this point, I don't even know if she wants to cross. And if she does, where does she want to cross? Straight ahead, or will she veer off and want to cross to her left? So the best way to handle this type of pedestrian is to simply keep an eye on her. So I will include her as part of my area scan until I get to the point where I clearly believe that she wants and is ready to cross the street. And once it's safe for me to stop, then I'll do so. Now, once she gets closer and I realize where she wants to cross, if I'm now too close to the intersection, or I would have to brake really hard to be able to stop, well then in that case, it's usually safer to not stop, because the stopping area is before I would enter the intersection. Now, let's talk about speed real quick. Because I'm in side street areas, I'm usually driving no higher than 30 kilometers per hour, which is around 20 miles per hour, which is pretty slow. So as I'm driving along, watching the pedestrian, I usually don't need to address my speed until I see that I will need to come to a stop for the pedestrian. But if I'm uncomfortable with my speed, I can do the old foot off the accelerator and coast method, or actually apply some brake if I'm going downhill. But the thing is, you never want to get caught in a cry wolf situation, which is where you have a skittish driver who keeps slowing almost to a stop every time they see a person who's even remotely close to the street or intersection, crosswalk or not. So in this example, you have the gray vehicle doing exactly that. So in position A, gray starts braking, and the red car isn't sure what's going on, so they patiently slow towards a stop as well. But they're wondering if gray was slowing because of that person in the yard, since they could see no other reason that gray was braking. And then comes position B, where it happens all over again. So this time, red starts getting frustrated. And finally, we get to position C, where this time red has had enough. So once gray starts braking again, red pulls out to pass in anger, gas pedal to the floor just in a great big huff. Only this time, there finally was a pedestrian in the middle of crossing the street. So question, does the gray driver have any responsibility for what might have happened? What do you think? Now, I discuss this further in a tidbits to follow, 2-2A, pedestrian safety, what is our responsibility as a driver? So think of your answer first and then come see what I have to say. So all we can really do as a driver is try and gather as much information as possible to help us make good choices. So information like how fast we're driving, signage, animals, and most important for this topic, what kind of pedestrian are we dealing with? So you're looking for information like the age and condition of the pedestrian. An older person using a cane isn't going to reach the corner within the same time as a teenager on a scooter, that kind of thing. And that young girl being pulled along by her dog is a very unpredictable situation that would definitely fall under the watch closely category. Okay, this looks like a good time to stop for this video. So don't forget to do your part, hit subscribe. And the notification button. And then join me next Tuesday at video number 4, where we'll finish up the going around things section by talking about going around different types of animals and a few other things that pop up once in a while. So goodbye for now, and as always, take care.